The shame was a physical thing, a hot, heavy cloak that settled over Maya Fletcher's shoulders. It pressed down, forcing her gaze to the pristine white marble floor she had just spent 3 hours polishing. A woman's voice, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the cavernous atrium of the Innovatech Tower. On your knees. Now. The command was not a request. It was a sentence, a judgment. Around her, a circle of well-dressed executives and event staff watched, their faces a mixture of pity, morbid curiosity, and cruel amusement. Phones were raised, small black mirrors reflecting her humiliation back at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She was a janitor. She was a black woman. In that moment, to that screaming manager, that was all she was. Powerless, insignificant. But what that manager, Carol Henderson, didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the name on her janitorial uniform, Johnson, was a lie. And the woman she was ordering to her knees was not just a janitor. She was the one who signed their paychecks. Let me take you back to the morning before. A morning that began not with shame, but with the quiet, gnawing ache of survival. The sun had not yet bothered to climb over the city skyline, but Maya was already awake. Her apartment was less a home and more a holding cell for her exhaustion. A single room where the kitchen, living room, and bedroom bled into one another. The paint on the walls was the color of old butter, peeling in long strips near the ceiling where a forgotten leak had left a permanent brown stain shaped like a sad continent. The radiator in the corner was a temperamental beast, either stubbornly silent or clanking with a fury that offered no actual warmth. She sat on the edge of her lumpy mattress, the springs groaning in protest. The air was cold enough to see her breath, a small, fleeting cloud in the gloom. On the tiny table next to her bed, under the dim glow of a cracked phone screen, lay a stack of envelopes. Each one was a tiny paper monster, its transparent window like a hungry mouth. Rent, past due, electricity, final notice. Medical bills from her grandmother's last days. A mountain of debt that felt insurmountable. She was tired. She was hungry. She was alone. Her grandmother, Eleanor Fletcher, had been the sun in her sky. A woman whose laughter could fill a room and whose hugs could mend a broken spirit. She had raised Maya after her parents were stolen from the world in a screech of tires and twisted metal. Eleanor had built Innovatech from nothing, from a dream sketched on a coffee shop napkin into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. But she never lost sight of the people. A company is not its patents or its profits, Maya, she used to say, her voice warm and steady. It is its people, from the boardroom to the boiler room. 6 months ago, that sun had set. Cancer had taken Eleanor, leaving a void in Maya's universe. It also left her an inheritance she never wanted. The entire company. The lawyers had been stunned when Maya, the sole heir, refused to take the corner office. She remembered her grandmother's final whispered words. Don't trust the reports, my love. Don't trust the smiling faces. Go and see. See the heart of it for yourself. Know your people. Then you can lead. So Maya Fletcher, heiress to a fortune, became Maya Johnson, janitor. She traded tailored suits for a worn gray jumpsuit. She traded a penthouse for this cramped, cold room. She wanted to see the company from the bottom up. She wanted to understand the lives of the people her grandmother had cared so much about. She needed to know if the heart of Innovatech was still beating with kindness, or if it had grown cold and hard with arrogance. She stood and walked to the kitchenette, her worn sneakers making no sound on the cracked linoleum. Breakfast was the last packet of instant oatmeal. As she stirred the lumpy paste with lukewarm tap water, her eyes fell on a small, framed photo on the counter. It was her and Eleanor, standing on a beach, the wind whipping their hair. Eleanor was beaming, her arm wrapped tightly around a teenage Maya. Taped to the frame was a note in her grandmother's elegant script. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is infinite. This was her true inheritance. Not the stocks, not the buildings, but this simple, powerful creed. It was the rule she lived by, even now, when she had almost nothing to give. She finished her meager breakfast, pulled on her stiff uniform, and prepared for another day of being invisible. Another day of watching, and listening, and waiting. She did not know that today, the waiting would end. Today, the heart of the company would be laid bare. The Innovatech Tower was a monument to modern ambition, a shard of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. Inside, the main atrium was a cathedral of corporate power. A 3-story waterfall cascaded down a wall of polished granite. Marble floors, white as a glacier, stretched out under a massive skylight. Today, the space was a hive of frantic activity. A major gala was scheduled for that evening, a celebration of the company's latest breakthrough. Event planners with headsets buzzed about. Florists arranged towering displays of lilies and orchids, and catering staff set up crystalline bars. Maya's job was simple, yet impossible. Keep the floor perfect. Every scuff mark, every stray footprint, every speck of dust was an enemy to be vanquished. She worked methodically, pushing her wide mop in long, graceful arcs, the scent of lemon-scented cleaner filling the air. She moved with a quiet efficiency that made her almost invisible to the bustling crowd, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit. She found a strange peace in the repetitive motion, a way to quiet the storm of grief and anxiety in her mind. She had just finished the final section near the main entrance when it happened. A man stumbled through the revolving doors. He was elderly, his face etched with a roadmap of wrinkles. His coat was shabby, his silver hair was disheveled, and he looked utterly lost. He clutched a paper cup of coffee in a trembling hand. He blinked, disoriented by the bright lights and the cacophony of the atrium. He took a hesitant step, then another, his foot catching on the edge of a decorative rug. Time seemed to slow. The cup tilted in his hand. A dark arc of coffee flew through the air, landing with a sickening splat right in the center of the perfect white marble floor. A collective gasp went through the nearby staff. The man, Arthur, stared at the brown puddle spreading across the white stone, his face a mask of confusion and dismay. "Oh dear," he mumbled, his voice frail. I'm so sorry." Immediately, a junior event planner named Mark scurried over to Maya. He was young, ambitious, and perpetually anxious. "Maya, don't," he hissed, his eyes wide with panic. "Just call security. Now! We can't have him here. He's probably homeless. He'll cause a scene." 2 marketing interns nearby started whispering, their gazes flicking from the old man to his spilled coffee with open disdain. "Can you believe the nerve?" one said. "Wandering in here like he owns the place." The other snickered. "Someone needs to get the trash out before the guests arrive." Their words were like tiny, sharp needles against Maya's skin. They saw a problem, a nuisance, a piece of trash. Maya looked at the old man, really looked at him. She saw the tremor in his hands, not from age, but from something else. She saw the pale, clammy sheen on his forehead. The confusion in his eyes wasn't that of a drunk or a vagrant. It was the fog of a medical crisis. He was swaying slightly, his breath coming in shallow pants. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. See the people, Maya, not the inconvenience. Mark was tugging at her sleeve. Security, Maya. My boss will have my head if he's still here in 2 minutes. The cost was clear. Helping this man meant falling behind schedule. It meant drawing the wrong kind of attention. It meant risking the wrath of a manager on the most stressful day of the quarter. Her job, the very position she had taken to fulfill her grandmother's wish, was on the line. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated. The weight of her own struggles pressed down on her. The overdue bills, the gnawing hunger, the sheer, bone-deep exhaustion of it all. It would be so easy to just make the call, to let someone else handle it, to remain invisible. But then she looked at the old man's frightened eyes, and the hesitation vanished, burned away by a fire of pure empathy. She could not. She would not. She gently pulled her arm away from Mark. He needs help, not security, she said, her voice quiet but firm. She ignored the intern's scoffing and the planner's frantic gestures. She walked over to the old man, Arthur, and knelt beside the coffee spill, not to clean it, but to get on his level. Sir, she said softly, are you all right? My name is Maya? Arthur blinked at her, his focus wavering. I think I missed my meeting, he stammered. I feel a bit dizzy. It's okay, Maya soothed. Let's get you some water and something to eat. You look like your blood sugar might be low. She reached into the pocket of her jumpsuit and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and a few coins. It was her lunch money. Her only money until her next paycheck. Without a second thought, she straightened up and walked to a nearby high-tech vending machine. She fed the precious bill into the slot and purchased a bottle of water and a small package of peanut butter crackers. Her stomach rumbled in protest, but she ignored it. She returned to Arthur, who had slumped onto a nearby velvet bench. She unscrewed the cap on the water bottle and handed it to him. Here, take a few sips. He drank gratefully. She opened the crackers and offered them to him. Please eat these, it will help. He took them with a trembling hand, his eyes finally clearing a little as he looked at her. A flicker of immense gratitude shone through the fog of his confusion. Thank you, he whispered. You are very kind. It was at that exact moment that the storm broke. A voice, sharp and imperious, boomed across the atrium, silencing all other noise. What in the name of all that is holy is going on here? Carol Henderson, senior operations manager, had arrived. She stood like a wrathful goddess, dressed in a severe but expensive navy blue suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight, unforgiving bun. Her face was a thundercloud of fury. She was the architect of the evening's gala, and someone had just desecrated her temple. Carol's ice-blue eyes swept the scene, landing on the dark stain on her perfect floor, the disheveled old man on a velvet bench, and the janitor standing beside him. Her lip curled in disgust. She marched forward, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. She didn't address the old man. She didn't address the spill. She aimed all her venom directly at the easiest target, at Maya. You! She barked, pointing a finger with a perfectly manicured nail. Janitor, I gave you one job. One! To have this floor spotless. And what do I find? You, hosting a tea party for a vagrant. The crowd of onlookers grew. Executives on their way to meetings, caterers, florists. They all stopped to watch the unfolding drama. Carol seemed to draw energy from their attention, her voice growing louder, more theatrical. Do you have any idea how much this event is worth? How important our guests are? And you are letting this filth defile the entrance. She waved a dismissive hand at Arthur, who flinched as if she had struck him. "Get him out of here!" Maya stood her ground, her body shielding the old man. "Ma'am, he's not well," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I think he needs medical attention." Carol let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Medical attention? He needs to be thrown out on the street where he belongs, and you need to do your job." She took another step closer, invading Maya's personal space, her voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss. "Is this what we're hiring now? People who have more sympathy for street trash than for the company that pays their salary? I should have known." Her eyes raked over Maya, from her worn sneakers to her simple, braided hair, and a cruel smirk played on her lips. "This is the problem. You lower the standards for hiring. You get people who don't understand professionalism. You don't belong here. Neither of you." The words were coded, but the meaning was clear. A poisoned dart of prejudice aimed right at Maya's heart. The public humiliation was a physical blow. She could feel the stares of the crowd, the weight of their judgment. She felt small, exposed, and utterly alone. Then came the final, soul-crushing act of degradation. Carol reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, the exact amount Maya had just spent on the old man, and threw it on the floor at Maya's feet. The bill fluttered down, landing right next to the coffee spill. "Here," Carol sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "A little tip for your troubles. Now get this garbage out of my sight." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air, savoring her power. Then she delivered the final blow, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "And then get on your knees and scrub this floor until it shines. After that, you can collect your things. You're fired." The words, "on your knees," echoed in the silent atrium. It was a command designed to break her, to strip away the last of her dignity in front of everyone. Maya's breath hitched. Her vision swam. The faces in the crowd blurred into a single monstrous entity of silent condemnation. Her grandmother's mission, her promise, her entire secret identity, it all felt like a foolish, childish game that had just spectacularly imploded. She was trapped, humiliated, fired. In that moment, she was nothing but a lazy janitor being put in her place. But as Maya stood frozen, a strange thing happened. The old man, Arthur, slowly finished his last cracker. The sugar and water were working their magic, clearing the diabetic fog from his mind. He straightened his back. The frail, confused man who had stumbled in was gone. In his place sat someone else entirely. His eyes, now sharp and intelligent, fixed on Carol Henderson. A profound, almost regal stillness settled over him. He had heard every word. Just as Carol opened her mouth to scream for security, another figure arrived, moving swiftly and silently through the gawking crowd. It was David Chen, the head of human resources. He was a calm, meticulous man in his late 50s, known for his unflappable demeanor and sharp intellect. He was one of the few people who knew Maya's true identity. A junior employee, horrified by Carol's tirade, had made a discreet call. David's eyes quickly assessed the scene. The furious manager, the humiliated janitor, the stunned crowd, and the old man on the bench. Then David's gaze locked onto Arthur, and his professional calm fractured for a split second. His eyes widened in disbelief and immediate recognition. He quickly composed himself, strode forward, and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. "Mr. Sterling," David said, his voice clear and deferential, Are you all right? We weren't expecting you until this afternoon. The name dropped into the charged atmosphere like a bomb. Sterling, as in Arthur Sterling, the legendary reclusive tech genius, the primary investor in Innovatech, a man so wealthy and powerful he was practically a myth, a man who hadn't been seen in public in over a decade. Carol Henderson froze mid-rant, her mouth hanging open. The crowd gasped. A wave of shock rippled through the atrium as people craned their necks, staring at the shabby old man, as if seeing him for the first time. Carol's face, which had been flushed with rage, turned a ghostly white. "Sterling," she stammered, her voice a weak, strangled whisper. That can't be. He's—" Her brain struggled to reconcile the image of the powerful billionaire with the vagrant she had just been verbally abusing. Arthur Sterling ignored her completely. He looked at David Chen, then at Maya, and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "I'm quite all right now, David," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Thanks to this young woman." David Chen nodded, then turned his cool, assessing gaze upon Carol. His voice was devoid of all warmth, as cold and hard as the marble floor. "Carol," he said, "you just made a grave error. You fired your boss." Carol blinked, her mind reeling in confusion. "My boss? What are you talking about? He's an investor. My boss is in Dubai." David shook his head slowly. "No, Carol, not him." His gaze shifted pointedly to Maya, who was still standing in stunned silence, the $5 bill lying at her feet like a dead leaf. The entire atrium held its breath. David let the silence stretch, twisting the knife. "Carol," he said, his voice resonating with theatrical gravity, "perhaps you've seen the large oil painting of our company's founder, the late Eleanor Fletcher, that hangs in the main lobby?" Carol nodded dumbly, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "Yes, of course," she whispered. David continued, his voice relentless. "I suggest you take a moment. Look at that portrait. Look at the strong jawline, the kind eyes, the determined set of her mouth. And then—" He paused, gesturing dramatically toward Maya. "I suggest you look at her granddaughter, the sole heir to the Fletcher estate, the new majority shareholder and rightful owner of this entire company, Miss Maya Fletcher." The reveal hit the room like a physical shockwave. A collective, audible gasp filled the air. People who had been recording on their phones lowered them slowly, their faces masks of utter disbelief. Carol Henderson's world did not just crumble. It was obliterated in a single, devastating instant. Her eyes darted from Maya's face to the massive, regal portrait of Eleanor Fletcher that dominated the far wall. The resemblance, once you looked for it, was undeniable. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. The blood drained from Carol's face, leaving it a waxy, sallow mask. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her knees, which she had commanded Maya to kneel on, buckled beneath her. She swayed, grabbing onto a nearby floral arrangement for support, crushing a dozen white lilies in her fist. "No," she breathed, the word a desperate, hollow puff of air. "No, that's impossible. She's a janitor." "She is the reason you have a job," Arthur Sterling said, his voice cutting through her denial. He had risen from the bench and now stood beside Maya, a silent, powerful guardian. "Or rather," he corrected himself, "the reason you had a job." The finality in his tone was absolute. The authority that Carol had wielded so cruelly just moments before had vanished, transferred completely to the young woman in the gray jumpsuit. Two security guards, who had been cautiously approaching, now stopped and looked uncertainly at David Chen, awaiting new orders. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been inverted with the force of a tectonic event. All eyes were on Maya. The humiliated janitor was gone. In her place stood a figure of immense, untapped power. Maya finally found her voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't vengeful. It was quiet, clear, and resonated with the unshakable authority she had inherited from her grandmother. She looked directly at the trembling, shattered woman who had tried to break her. "You're right about one thing, Carol," Maya said, her voice even. "I am fired." She let the words hang in the air for a beat, watching the flicker of desperate hope in Carol's eyes before extinguishing it. "From my position as a janitor." She then turned her gaze to David Chen. "David," she commanded, her tone now that of a CEO. "Please process Carol Henderson's immediate termination for cause. Gross misconduct and violation of the company's core values. Ensure her access to all company property and systems is revoked, effective immediately. Please have security escort her from the building." Carol finally broke. A gut-wrenching sob tore from her throat. She lunged forward, her composure completely gone. "No, please, Miss Fletcher. I didn't know. I was under so much stress. The gala. Please, I have a mortgage. A family." She was begging, pleading, her words a desperate, pathetic torrent. But there was no pity in Maya's eyes, only a deep, profound disappointment. "So do I," Maya said softly, thinking of her cold apartment and her overdue bills. "So do the people you step on every day to feel powerful." The security guards moved in, gently but firmly taking Carol by the arms. She continued to wail, a shrill, ugly sound that echoed in the vast space. "It was a mistake, a simple mistake. Please don't do this." As they led her away, a sobbing, broken wreck, her designer heels dragging on the marble floor, Maya bent down. She did not kneel. She simply bent at the waist, picked up the crumpled $5 bill, and smoothed it out. Then she walked over to the coffee stain and placed the bill beside it. Then Maya turned to face the stunned, silent crowd. Her audience, the bystanders who had watched her humiliation. Her voice, stronger now, filled the atrium. "My grandmother, Eleanor Fletcher, built this company on one principle. Respect," she began. "Respect for every single person who walks through these doors, whether they are a client, an executive, or the person who cleans the floors at night. She believed that a person's worth is not measured by their title or their salary, but by their character, by how they treat those they believe have no power over them." She gestured towards the path where Carol had been dragged away. "What you just witnessed is the poison my grandmother fought against. The arrogance, the prejudice, the cruelty born of entitlement. This is not what Innovatech stands for. This will not be tolerated here. Not anymore." Her eyes swept across the faces in the crowd, many of whom now looked down in shame. Today we saw true character on display. We saw a woman willing to humiliate another for a spilled cup of coffee. And, she paused, her gaze landing on Arthur Sterling. Now we saw a woman who used her last $5 to show kindness to a stranger in need. She looked at the junior employee, Mark, who had tried to stop her. He looked terrified. Then she looked past him, to a young woman in the back, an intern who was crying silently. It was she who had made the call to HR. Maya pointed to her. "You. What is your name?" The young woman looked startled. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah, thank you," Maya said, her voice warm. "You did the right thing. You showed courage. That is the character Innovatech will now reward." A single person began to clap. then another. Within seconds, the entire atrium erupted in thunderous, sustained applause. It was a sound of shock, of relief, of a deep and resonant agreement. The shame that had cloaked Maya was gone, replaced by the mantle of leadership she was born to wear. The gala would still happen that evening, but it would be a very different celebration. It would be the dawn of a new era for Innovatix, an era that began not with a breakthrough in technology, but with a simple, profound act of kindness. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change, a testament to Maya's newfound resolve. The story of what happened in the atrium, the Janitor CEO, as the media quickly dubbed it, went viral. It was a modern-day parable that captured the public imagination. But for Maya, it wasn't about the fame or the headlines. It was about making good on her grandmother's legacy, brick by painful, necessary brick. Her first official act as CEO was to call an all-hands meeting in the very atrium where she had been humiliated. The room was packed. Every employee, from the highest-ranking executive to the newest mailroom clerk, was there. She stood on the stage, not in a power suit, but in a simple, elegant black dress. Behind her, projected on a giant screen, was the photo of her and Eleanor on the beach. "Many of you know me now as Maya Fletcher," she began, her voice steady and clear. "But for the last 6 months, I was Maya Johnson. I cleaned your offices, I emptied your trash cans, I polished this very floor." She let that sink in. "I saw how this company truly operates. I saw the quiet dignity of the night crew. I saw the stress of the junior associates. And I saw the casual cruelty of those who believe their position puts them above basic human decency." She then announced what would become known as the Fletcher Mandate. First, the immediate implementation of a new company-wide minimum wage, $35 an hour for every single employee, including all third-party contractors for janitorial, security, and cafeteria services. A wave of audible gasps and murmurs swept through the crowd, especially from the service staff standing in the back. For them, it was a life-altering announcement. It meant rent could be paid. It meant food on the table. It meant hope. Next, she announced the creation of the Eleanor Fletcher Dignity Fund, a $10 million fund, seeded from her own inheritance, designed to provide immediate, no-questions-asked emergency grants to any employee facing a personal crisis, a medical emergency, a family tragedy, the threat of eviction. "No one at Innovatech will ever have to choose between their health and their job again," she declared, her voice thick with emotion. Finally, she addressed the culture. She announced a complete overhaul of management training, focusing on empathy, respect, and servant leadership. "Your success as a manager will no longer be measured by your team's output alone," she stated firmly. "It will be measured by your team's well-being. We are a family, and we will start acting like one." The applause that followed was deafening, genuine, and filled with an overwhelming sense of relief and renewed purpose. The rewards were not just corporate. They were personal. David Chen and Arthur Sterling, who had become her trusted advisors, arranged for her move out of the dismal one-room apartment. She didn't move into a sterile mansion. Instead, she chose a beautiful, light-filled penthouse apartment downtown, large enough not just for her, but for her dreams. The first night there, she stood on the balcony, looking out at the glittering city lights, the cacophony of the streets below a distant hum. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She felt home. A team of designers came, offering to furnish it with expensive, minimalist art and furniture. Maya thanked them, but politely declined most of their suggestions. Instead, she filled the space with comfortable couches, shelves overflowing with books, and photographs of her grandmother. In her new, state-of-the-art home office, amidst the gleaming technology and panoramic views, she had one thing framed and mounted on the wall directly opposite her desk: her worn gray janitor's uniform. It was her constant reminder, a symbol of where she had been, and a promise of the leader she would strive to be. She didn't forget those who had been kind to her when she had nothing. The security guard, a kind man named Ben, with whom she had often shared her meager lunch, was promoted. Recognizing his quiet diligence and integrity, Maya made him the head of her personal security detail, doubling his salary and giving him a position of trust and respect. Sarah, the young intern who had bravely called HR, was given a full-time position on Maya's personal staff, with a scholarship to complete her business degree, fully funded by the company. Maya was not just building a better company, she was building a community, rewarding character as much as competence. And what of Carol Henderson? Her downfall was as spectacular as Maya's rise. The story, complete with cell phone footage of her screaming tirade and pathetic collapse, was everywhere. She became the face of corporate arrogance, a meme, a cautionary tale. Fired for cause, she received no severance, no golden parachute. She was blacklisted in the tech industry and beyond. No company wanted to be associated with her brand of public toxicity. We can imagine her trying to find a new job. Sitting in an interview, the hiring manager's eyes would flicker with recognition. "Wait, aren't you the one from that video?" The question would hang in the air, thick with judgment. The interview would end shortly after. Her high-flying corporate lawyer husband, mortified by the public scandal and the damage to his own reputation, filed for divorce. He cited irreparable reputational damage in the legal documents. The court battles drained her finances. She had to sell her sprawling suburban home, her luxury car, her designer wardrobe. Piece by piece, the external markers of her status were stripped away. The irony was brutal and poetic. Carol Henderson, the woman who sneered at the poor and looked down on service workers, eventually found herself working behind the counter of a fast food restaurant to make ends meet. She, who had commanded another human being to get on their knees, now spent her days on her feet, taking orders, cleaning grease traps, and being treated with the same casual indifference she had once so freely dispensed. She was now the one who was invisible, the one whose character was tested daily by the small humiliations of a life she never imagined would be hers. Justice, it turned out, had a wicked sense of humor. 1 year later, the Innovatech Tower was transformed. The atmosphere was no longer one of high-strung tension, but of collaborative energy. The atrium, now officially renamed the Eleanor Fletcher Hall of Kindness, featured a new digital display near the entrance. It didn't show stock prices or corporate achievements. Instead, it cycled through photos and stories of employees from every department, being recognized for acts of kindness and teamwork. Innovatech was more profitable than ever. Employee turnover had plummeted to near zero. Productivity and innovation had soared. Happy, secure, and respected employees, it turned out, were the greatest competitive advantage of all. Maya Fletcher was on the cover of Forbes, not as an heiress, but as a revolutionary leader. The Fletcher model was being taught as a case study in business schools around the world. Maya, however, paid little attention to the accolades. She was too busy working. We see her now, not in a stuffy boardroom, but on the floor of the company's new, state-of-the-art childcare center, which she had established for all employees. She is sitting cross-legged on a colorful rug, helping a small child build a tower of blocks. She knows the names of the children. She knows the names of their parents. She is not a distant ruler in an ivory tower. She is a present and engaged leader. Her foundation, run by a team she handpicked for their compassion and efficiency, had become a major force for good in the city. It had opened 2 community centers in underserved neighborhoods, offering job training, after-school programs, and legal aid. The foundation was building bridges, providing ladders, and changing lives on a scale Maya had only dreamed of. The ripple effects of her one act of kindness and the stand she took were spreading far beyond the walls of her company. The day ends. The tower quiets down. Maya is often the last one to leave. She walks through the silent, gleaming halls, the weight of her responsibilities heavy but welcome on her shoulders. As she passes through the Eleanor Fletcher Hall of Kindness, she sees a young man, an intern from the engineering department, frantically trying to clean up a coffee spill near the elevators. He has a major presentation to the board in the morning and is clearly stressed, having worked late into the night. He looks up as Maya approaches, his face filled with panic, expecting a reprimand. The old Maya, the janitor, would have been invisible to him. The new Maya, the CEO, could have walked by, pretending not to see. But that is not who she is. That is not who she will ever be. She smiles, a warm, genuine smile that reaches her eyes. "Looks like you could use a hand," she says. Before the stunned intern can protest, Maya Fletcher, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, kneels down. She grabs a handful of napkins from a nearby dispenser and begins to help him wipe up the mess from the marble floor. "Don't worry," she says gently, sensing his anxiety. "It's just coffee. We've all been there." She helps him finish cleaning, then walks with him to the 24-hour cafe in the lobby. She buys him a fresh coffee and a pastry, listening as he nervously talks about his project. She offers a few words of encouragement, praises his hard work, and tells him she's looking forward to his presentation. She sees the tension leave his shoulders, replaced by a look of profound gratitude and inspiration. As she finally walks out of the revolving doors and into the cool night air, she looks up at the towering spire of glass and steel that bears her family's name. She has come full circle. She understands now, more than ever, the truth in her grandmother's words. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is infinite. It is the foundation upon which true legacies are built. She has scrubbed the floors, and she has chaired the board. She has been humiliated, and she has been vindicated. And through it all, she has learned that true power isn't about giving orders from on high. It's about being willing to kneel down and help someone up. The cycle of kindness continues, not because it is a corporate mandate, but because it is written on her heart. She gets into the back of her car, her driver Ben smiling at her in the rearview mirror, and heads home, ready for whatever challenges the next day will bring, secure in the knowledge that she is finally, truly, the leader her grandmother always knew she would be.